Okay, the broadcast is starting. All right, thank you. It's 2:00. We'll call the meeting to order. And if you'll join me, please, we'll stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thank you. And again, once again, welcome to the October 14th, 2021 Space Coast TPO Governing Board meeting. Public comment. Do we have any public comment for non-agenda items? We do not have any. All right. Thank you. Just if anyone else does wish to make a comment, as a reminder, anyone wishing to make a comment on an item not on the agenda should complete a speaker card and give it to Miss Lisa right here. All right. Item number 3, reports. Georgiana.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's really great to see everyone today. I'd like to introduce you to a new member of the TPO family. Please welcome Jillian John, which is standing right there. Jillian is our Finance and Contracts Manager, and she's an Air Force veteran, and she comes from us from the city of Melbourne in the Finance Department. Yes. So we are just really excited to have her, and we're looking forward to her contributions. Also, the National Association of Regional Councils provided a very detailed analysis of the current bipartisan infrastructure bill. And it's very specific information as it relates to MPOs. And so I've included that in your agenda package for your reading pleasure. And it goes into some very specific information. A lot of the things that are in that bill we are already doing, such as Vision Zero, but there's a lot of new things in there as well. The House and Senate did pass legislation last Thursday, I believe, to fund government until December the 3rd. Averting a shutdown, at least for 2 months. And lawmakers, have time to seek a resolution to the impasse on the spending packages. So it's no telling where this is going, but we'll have to wait and see if these ongoing negotiations are productive. Also, I wanted to let you know the TPO is assisting Space Coast Area Transit through funding and managing an onboard and online survey. And this data will be used in upcoming plans and projects, such as the Transit Development Plan. The onboard survey was completed October the 2nd with over 600 responses. The online survey is underway and will run through the months of October and November. And this information can really influence potential riders and understand what improvements are needed in our transit system. Also, ultimately it'll assist in reducing traffic fatalities and roadway congestion as well. So we have a very good partnership with Terry Jordan, the Director of Space Coast Area Transit, and we appreciate his leadership. So we think this will be really good information. We've been working very closely with DOT District 5 to develop a funding plan for the TPO's list of project priorities. Of course, our number 1 priority, Ellis, the construction of Ellis, and funding the Transportation Management Center. Those are our number 1 and number 2. Also advancing US 192 and Hollywood Boulevard intersection. We have that fully funded for construction in 24. And so we really would like to get that advanced. I know the county has been wanting to reconstruct Evans Road for quite a while. They'd love to do it immediately, but for them to go ahead and do that while you've got this major project funded in fiscal year 24, that makes it very difficult because you would have to completely tear up the road. So these are some of the things that we've been working with the department on. They are not definitive yet. We've also been working on funding some ITS projects for the city of Palm Bay, very important ITS projects, trying to get the design funded and then construction in the out years. So this is all still being developed. The department has also received stimulus funding, and they are in the middle, deep into that, trying to get some of those projects programmed. And Anna Taylor will be giving a slight update on that in a little bit, or what she knows at the time. So what to expect in December? The DOT will be presenting the new tentative work program. So any new projects, any new funding at the December meeting, they'll be presenting that. They'll also be having a public meeting coming up soon. We're also going to have a Brightline presentation. It's been a long time since Brightline has been here. And so we'd like to hear the latest on the construction. And of course, what we always want to know is when are we going to get our station? And what do we need to do to make that happen? And there's certainly, it's not going to happen by itself. It's going to require some work. So it's time for that conversation. And it's my understanding that the city of Cocoa has already started that conversation. And also we're going to have a presentation from the Vieira Company. They are this major planned community, and I think it's time that we kind of hear from them, hear about the transportation system and what is going on there. So also in your agenda package, you have Abby's public engagement and outreach report for October and November. And we've got a lot of events coming up in those 2 months. And you also have some flyers at your place. And there are 2 beach trolley celebration events, which is very exciting. And we also have Mobility Week from October the 29th through November the 6th. And on that flyer, there are many various events that if you would like to participate, feel free, because it's a very busy time for all of us at the Space Coast TPO and Space Coast Area Transit. And so, Madam Chair, that concludes my report.
All right, thank you very, very much. I was supposed to remind you, please, when you do speak, to turn on your microphones and speak into your microphones. The Technical and Citizens Advisory Committee report.
Sure.
Georgiana.
The Technical and Citizen Advisory Committee met on Monday. At your place, you will find a summary of actions and attendance from the meetings, and the committees recommend that the TPO approve the consent agenda and letters of support for House and Senate resolution for Vision Zero.
All right, thank you. Item C, FDOT report, Anna Taylor.
Good afternoon. Anna Taylor, FDOT District 5. As Georgiana mentioned, our work program public hearing is coming up at the end of this month. We will be hosting that online the week of October 25th. That will have a GIS component where you'll be able to go online and see an interactive map and look at all the projects within Brevard County. We will also host an open house at the district office in DeLand on the evening of the 28th. Staff will be present to answer any questions that you may have. We'll also be coming to your board in the month of December to give a Brevard specific presentation regarding the work program. I wanted to highlight that we have started work on State Road 520 from the Orange County line to just west of State Road 524. The contractor has done well to maintain westbound traffic flow with only one accessible travel lane. We also have a project that started work this month at the Pineda Causeway in US 1, bringing various improvements to the intersection, including signalization, lane widening, and adding a lane to improve safety for turning vehicles. We also kicked off the 401 bridge replacement study out at Port Canaveral. We had a great meeting with them last week. We're really excited for that. That's a vital connection for the cruise terminal, as well as military facilities and space operation. As Georgiana highlighted, the district has received our allocations for stimulus. At this time, there is a safety project in Brevard County on State Road 501 from 520 to State Road 528. That is funded for construction in fiscal year 23. The design is $2 million and construction at $7.5 million. This project is a safety project, and it will enhance pedestrian and bicycle facilities, traffic control systems, as well as speed management. We will be working closely with the TPO and the local agencies to ensure that this project has a community vision as we move forward. And that is my report. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions for Anna? Yes, Skip.
Have they got far enough along in the 401 bridge study to decide whether they're going to end up with a higher bridge or not?
No, sir. We just kicked it off. So we'll be doing a alternatives meeting. I think I'd have to get you the schedule, but they will do an alternatives meeting. We're not quite there yet.
Thank you.
One more for me, Madam Chair.
Yes, please.
Just real briefly, this is both from constituents of mine and also my own thoughts. Sometimes the two are one and the same, sometimes they're not. In this case, they are. There was a public meeting that was held at the Radisson in Cape Canaveral pretty recently here to discuss the proposed roundabout up there. Now, regardless of whether people are for it in concept but not in design, or whether they're against it, I think it's important to have public participation in that sort of process. I was at the Government Center in Vieira. It's probably, I would guesstimate, a 50-mile round trip to go up and go back. I checked before going to ensure that they were going to take public comment, drove up there, was given a folder that had a public comment card to put your information on. And when I inquired as to where I should leave the card, because it wasn't really clear to me at the entryway, I was told there's either a box inside or you can leave it with me, the young lady that was doing the registration. And I thought that's kind of funny. How can they determine order if they have multiple locations where they're accepting these cards? And the answer became pretty apparent to me in short order. Order didn't matter because public comment was you basically indicate to DOT that you have something you want to say, and hypothetically DOT may get back to you at some point in time. There were a lot of folks that I know of, including myself, who when we heard public comment was going to be accepted, made a trip there, some potentially even from further than I was, who were rather dismayed, to put it lightly, that they could put their name in a box for a callback. I think that the goal for a lot of these folks was to see what the community felt, and they felt that there would be a benefit. I felt there would be a benefit as well in hearing what constituents of mine thought about the project, so I'd have a better idea in terms of how vocally, if at all, to oppose it. But I can tell you whether you support it or oppose it or support it in concept, again, I just think that the manner in which that was set up, where it was advertised as a meeting or a forum in which public comment would be accepted, and then to have a box that you could leave a card in, it just left a lot to be desired. I'm not upset at you because I cannot imagine that you had anything to do with the planning, but if you just pass along to the folks that are in the hierarchy that have the ability to make decisions on those things, from an otherwise great department in the recent past, it was kind of an item that fell short.
Yeah, thank you for your comment and thank you for attending. It was very well attended. We have tried to make those accommodations by the way we advertise them. It is kind of confusing when we say public meeting versus a public hearing. And so we have tried to include the words open house so people kind of understand that it's not an official forum like a public hearing where we would have a court reporter. But I can certainly take all of your comments back. And if you'd like a meeting with the project team, I'm sure they would entertain that.
I mean, for me, I think the department has a pretty good idea in terms of where I stand with it. So I'm not going to be too repetitive by going over it again. But I think, frankly, sometimes there's a value in just being blunt. If you're going to have hearings or not, excuse me, not hearings, you can have town halls of that sort. See, I'm slipping on it again. You may just want to say public comment will not be accepted at this hearing, but requests to speak with DOT can be left. I think anytime you have the word public in the title of the event, there's an assumption from a lot of folks that they're going to accept public comment. And in fact, I know I was told, and I cannot, in all honesty, because it wasn't something that was noteworthy at the time, remember which particular employee told me that they take public comment. And in a sense, technically, they were accurate in that they are taking public comment in a way. I can tell you, I'm going to be a lot more careful in the future in terms of determining whether or not it's an event that is going to accept the sort of comment that I was looking to provide at the time. But, it's something where a lot of the folks that were there, who I was familiar with approached me and expressed their dismay with it. And I've had folks reach out to me afterwards about it. And the funny thing is, some of the folks were even in favor of the project. So it wasn't that they were all necessarily looking to boo-hoo it. There was a disproportionate share that were looking to do that. But even the folks that were supportive, I think were a little less than thrilled to see that it wasn't something that was made an option to them there.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Ms. Taylor? All right, thank you.
you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Taylor. Thank you for your report. Next item, consent agenda. Georgiana, would you please read the consent agenda aloud for the record?
Yes, the consent agenda 4A is the approval of the governing board minutes of September the 9th, 2021, and then approval of the committee appointments. You also have an add-on at your place. So we are asking for approval of the consent agenda with the add-on.
Motion by Mr. Jordan, second by Ms. Minus. Is that correct, Mr. Jordan? Thank you. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Item 5, we have an action item. Approval of the Vision Zero federal legislation support and Vision Zero action plan status report. Kim.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. How are you doing?
Great, thank
So
you.
it's been about 2 years since we embarked on the road to zero, and we want to give you a report before we get to the action piece of this about where we are with that process. Of course, it was July of 2019 when you gave us the approval on the work order to start the Vision Zero process. And a year later, we've adopted our action plan and started working on a lot of different things. So I love this slide because this is what Vision Zero is all about. We came together, at the beginning, and we approved the process to start it. We're staying together by continuing to report back to you and meet with our stakeholders and that type of thing. And this is how we will get success. We stay together and we stay on the same path and work together. Let's start out with a little video that kind of describes how the whole Vision Zero thing links up. Yeah.
Imagine her world in the year 2050. A colony on Mars, bloodless surgery, clean, sustainable energy. The future makes almost anything possible, including zero roadway deaths.
I am confident we can do this together. We must. And the groundwork that this organization, this coalition has built together over the years will be a key part of that.
3 strategies will lead the way. Countermeasures that work have already saved thousands of lives. We will double down on what we know works.
We shouldn't forget about tried and true non-tech interventions that are out there also ready to be used.
In 30 years, from 1994 to 2014, miles traveled increased 35%, yet traffic fatalities decreased by 5%. Countermeasures work. Safety belts and airbags, DUI checkpoints and laws, red light cameras, traffic roundabouts, and child restraint systems. The road to zero will accelerate the development of advanced driver assistance systems, or ADAS. Human drivers are fallible. Drivers are tired. Drivers are impaired. Drivers are distracted. Smart machines are not. New ADAS technology is being added to new cars every day at all price levels. Car makers have voluntarily agreed to add AEB, automatic emergency braking, to all new cars by 2022.
There's really a remarkable number of technologies that are really coming way down in price. So camera technologies that can have special, essentially computer vision that look out ahead of you and can detect stopped cars and threats, pedestrians that are about to cross in front of you.
Human behavior is such that only technology can override the poor choices that people make when they're operating a vehicle.
Culture and behaviors can change.
We can seek to make safety a priority within our personal lives, within our businesses, corporations, associations, our neighborhoods, schools.
50 years ago, people freely littered. Millions smoked in public. The use of safety belts was not the norm. People can change. The road to zero requires a rigorous adoption of safety culture.
Safety needs to be a priority. It needs to be part of our culture.
Today, her future is already on the road to zero. The map is clear. Evidence-based solutions are being funded. The journey has begun.
Achieving zero roadway fatalities is not impossible. It just hasn't been done yet. This is our generation's moonshot.
Of the ending of that video, I've kind of think about that about everything, not just Vision Zero. It just hasn't happened yet. Doesn't mean it can't be done. I think we proved that we can do an awful lot of things. But to get back to Vision Zero, with everything that we've done and everything that we're proud of, we've been able to keep this discussion and work going forward. We're heading in the wrong direction with our traffic fatalities and serious injuries. COVID had an effect on traffic just like it did on everything else. What happened for traffic safety, the roads emptied out and everybody that was out there could drive like maniacs, more than they do so when the roads are full. That, you know, it just, the speed, everything just went off the charts. And so if you look at Brevard County, and this was the same time period, January to August, last year compared to this year, we're at 10 more serious injury crashes and 14 more fatalities as of the end of August here in Brevard County. So even though the roads are filling back up, they're still seeing these tremendous speeds and aggressive driving too. This is kind of a breakdown of where we see the crashes happening and our vulnerable road users. Of course, they always represent a larger part of this than we want them to. And you can see here in Brevard County, it's that same reporting time period. 48.21% of our fatalities are those folks that we consider vulnerable road users, which are bicyclists, pedestrians, and motorcycles. All right, this generated a lot of discussion on Monday. So this is a breakdown of same time period, January to August, where we sit, what areas have serious injuries and fatalities. And I don't think that it's any secret that some of the bigger areas, of course, are having a bigger problem.
I just want to make a comment. There's where the dashes are, those are either unreported or is that zero? Should that be zero?
Yeah, those are zero. That meant there was nothing there.
Okay.
So those are zeros.
I'll try not to say anything wrong, but you know, the Indian Atlantic, Indian Harbor Beach, Satellite Beach stretch of A1A, not talking South Patrick, but that section of roadway all the way back to when I was in college at FIT in the 70s was always known for very astute enforcement of the traffic laws. And I think they have carried that on to this current time. And I think that's part of the reason why these numbers reflect that.
Thank you.
Kudos
for,
to them.
Thank you for proving a point that we talk about. It's a culture. I've lived in Brevard County my whole life, and when I started to drive, I was told, don't speed Satellite Beach, Indian Harbor, because you're going to get pulled over. It's a culture. It's been there for a long time. That's what we need to do for the entire county. Don't speed, don't drive crazy, don't do those things in Brevard County. Thank you, Mr. Williams. I appreciate that.
They did make them quit putting the martini glass in the car.
Yeah, I remember that too. I do. I remember that.
Hey, well, you know, I'm a big fan, but I wanted to just refer to this briefly because it caught my attention, of course. And that's because 6 months ago, I became I'm on that first column, luckily not on the second column, when I was in a serious accident. So I started looking at the populations because anyway, I don't think the heat map really reflects the odds of getting hit. And so when I started to go, and all I had was a 2019 population statistics available to me. It was, let's see, because Titusville is way up there, but the chance of getting hit in Titusville is 1 out of 1,649 people. In Melbourne, their numbers are up there, and it's pretty hot there. Their numbers are 1 in every 2,137 people. In Cocoa, our numbers are don't seem like that much. 1 in 1,017 people. So if I live in Cocoa versus, well, in Palm Bay, it was 1 in 1,372 people. So Palm Bay and Cocoa are actually the hottest spots. And that's important because as decision makers, we have to prioritize. And I would hope we would be looking at that. And I hope this doesn't get out to the general Cocoa population. But if I live in Cocoa, what is that percentage wise? I mean, I have like a, what? A very high one compared to other cities in Brevard. And I can tell you, a serious accident, a serious injury changes the rest of your life. You know, and 2 seconds later, I would have been in the second column. So, I mean, it's very real. And in terms of us being policymakers, not to belabor the point, but I think the heat map doesn't really reflect. And I think we really need to look at per capita. And also the fact that Palm Bay and Cocoa, that we have the highest percentage chance of being in an accident like that. I think we're probably socioeconomically at the bottom of the list as well. So there's some correlations there. And in terms of priorities, I hope we'll all take that into account.
I appreciate that input. I know we've already had some discussions since Monday that there's some other data that we need to look at. This was just for the report. And you're right, this map only represents the crashes that have happened.
Right.
So there's nothing else that goes into that.
So right along that same vein, man, 120,000 population in the city of Palm Bay. And so going right along with her comment, when you take in that stat, you have to consider when we're considering those roundabouts, I don't think that's a good, successful way for public safety. I don't think that there's a place for the roundabouts is in the city of Palm Bay, although they may be proven to have public safety benefit. We can be cookie cuttered like everyone else throughout our community and throughout our nation. Just want to put that out there, man.
Well, and we don't want to, this is not the presentation for a roundabout discussion, but I'm not an engineer, but there are formulas and there are places in Palm Bay, of course, they wouldn't even consider putting them. It's all based on proven volume counts and all of that kind of thing. So.
Yes, Commissioner Lober.
Couple thoughts. First, just real briefly on the roundabout, whether we're talking Palm Bay or Cape Canaveral. I know that kind of the trendy term or the term du jour is traffic calming. And I remember from a prior meeting that my colleague, Mr. Forrester here, has some thoughts about how calm he is with a semi traveling a couple feet closer to his car and a couple feet closer to certain death. I can tell you that I've come to a better understanding as to what traffic calming means. It's actually the reverse. It's like a jumbo shrimp. It's kind of like an oxymoron term, but it's all contained in one word. It calms in the sense that it aggravates you so much that you drive in a certain fashion. So it's really the inverse of what it would imply. Be that as it may, is now an appropriate time, Madam Chair, to talk about this Vision Zero resolution?
I think this would be the
Would
time.
that work? Okay. I'm not trying to be a jerk on this. I agree with essentially everything that Ms. Cost stated. Just as I don't want Ms. Cost to get hit by a car, I don't want Mr. Robinson to get hit by a car, I don't want Ms. Minus to get hit by a car, Mr. Googleman, myself, anyone here. I don't think any of us should be hit by a car. It shouldn't matter what ethnicity we are, what gender we are, what age we are. I think it would be good for all of us to go about our days without being struck by a car. I have no problem whatsoever with the goal of reducing traffic fatalities or reducing traffic accidents. I do have a concern, however, when you look at the text of this bill that we're asking our legislators to support, in particular, where it gets into page 77 and 78, talking about equity-related issues. When they're talking about supporting efforts to address disparities and other equity-related issues related to transportation safety, I would feel a lot more comfortable for everyone, whether they're Black, Hispanic, Asian, white, male, female, young, old, middle-aged, to say support efforts to address high accident locations and just take all the other stuff out of it, because it shouldn't matter what your particular demographic characteristics are. You just shouldn't be hit by a car. And if there are areas and they happen to have more whites or more blacks or more whatever, it is what it is, and that's where the money needs to be spent. But I think that this almost politicizes it in a partisan way when it talks about other equity-related issues, because I don't know what that means, and what it means to me may be different than it means to someone else. So I have no problem supporting a resolution promoting the goal of what this is doing to address high accident locations. But I have a problem supporting this in its entirety, given the fact that it's got some language that I'm just not comfortable with, because I don't know that it's terribly specific. And I think that it could be said in a manner that takes out ethnicity and gender and age and all that stuff and focuses the resources simply on where the need is based on the accident locations, as opposed to the color of someone's skin or where their gender or what have you. So I don't know where anyone else is with that. And
I'd second a motion if you forward it that way.
Okay, I'm happy to draft something if y'all want that supports this in concept, and I'm not looking to water down what the goal is. But essentially, I would support legislation that has the goal that's identified in this of reducing traffic accidents and fatalities in high accident locations. But I'd just like to take all the demographics out of it and just make it focused on where the accidents are. And if it so happens to be, as it probably is, that it's in certain areas that have either a higher percentage or a lower percentage by extension of a particular ethnicity or gender, it is what it is. But I think that everyone has the same right, regardless of what their checkboxes are, of being able to get through the day without getting killed or without getting maimed.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Yes, Ms. Kim?
I was just going to respond to what he said. I think, well, I know actually through my work that the reason that wording like that is in there is because those communities of concern have typically been left out of the equation. So everybody is trying to be inclusive of that. They're the type of folks that won't typically show up at your meetings and that type of thing. And we've had lots of instances of communities being cut through with freeways, not here in Brevard County, and they're trying to avoid that. So I think that's why they're putting language in the resolution to make sure that everybody is taken care of and you're not being left out, because traditionally that has happened.
The problem is if it said what you said, I wouldn't necessarily have an issue with it whatsoever, but it has terminology that frankly, I really think is, whether it should be or not, it's unnecessarily partisan. I had someone email me that used the same exact term, equity, and I wrote back literally, I think 3 words, what is equity, or how do you define equity? And then I got an offer to meet with me and I wrote back, how do you define equity? The problem is it's unfortunately a trigger word for a lot of folks. And I can tell you that supporting the goal to me is more important than getting bogged down in any of this stuff. But if we're the ones that are sending out the letter, nothing says that we have to support it verbatim identical. The fact is there's a process that has to go through up there just as things have to go through down here, whether it's at the city or the county or even the state level where amendments are made. And I'm not talking about loving this to death. I'm talking about making a change so it does exactly what you suggested, that it focuses on the areas where the need is the highest. And if they've been traditionally neglected, if the traffic counts and the data shows that that's where the money needs to be spent, wonderful, spend the money there. If 10 out of 10 of them are there, then wonderful, spend the money there all the same. But I think taking out unnecessary demographics cannot hurt. I think it can only help. And the fact of the matter is if, as you suggest, and I don't necessarily doubt it, that a majority of those areas are, have a correlation either with a lower socioeconomic standing or the particular ethnicity or ethnicities, there's still going to be high accident locations. And if we support funding necessary improvements to reduce fatalities and serious injuries at high accident locations, we're going to accomplish that goal, but we're just not injecting factors that don't need to be a part of the process.
Ma'am, I'd like to also add that we recently looked at that same issue, and what it caused in the city of Palm Bay was the division that Commissioner Lober's actually expressing. That's why I'm so supportive of that addendum. And I agree, we don't have to go verbatim. Objectively, when we discuss different race and ethnicities, what we're doing is we're dividing a community. This is a different community than anywhere else. So with all due respect, ma'am, this is Brevard County, and in the city of Palm Bay, this came up, and there was such division over it that we didn't even look at it. It was just tabled. We didn't even move forward because of the way it's written. So I would support a motion that would change and change that verbiage or draft that so that we can accomplish the ultimate goal of that zero fatality rate or zero traffic.
I'll go ahead, according to Mr. Mayor's comments, I'll go ahead and make a motion to authorize, if you guys want our chair to do it, I'm sorry to volunteer you to create some homework for her. I'm happy to trust her to do it, or our good mayor here to do it, or I'll do it if you all want me to do it. Basically supporting the concept of addressing high accident locations without referring to anything that deals with a demographic whatsoever. So if the demographics happen to be a certain way at a high accident location, they are what they are. It's simply measured by the real issue is where people are getting hit.
I second it.
Yes, Mr. Williams.
I'll turn mine off.
I'll turn mine off.
So anyway, I think if there's going to be something brought forward, if there's going to be something brought forward by Commissioner Lober, that the proper action of this board would be to table it until he brings that back to us to date certain, be it the December meeting, probably our next opportunity. But I would also ask him or his staff to go through the legislative requirements. I think for any bill that comes out nowadays, there's probably some legislative language that says any bill from now on has to have this inclusive language included in it somewhere. And that may be why all that inclusive language is in there. And it may not be that they're doing it because they have to. Well, they're doing it because they have to, not because it's specific to this particular bill or issue. So you may want to look into that, because otherwise, if we take that out and it goes back to them and they go, well, here's the statute that says we have to have that in there, then it's basically a moot point.
Well, these are federal resolutions. We don't have any ability to change them. It would be your letter of support that would have to be worded in a way that.
Right, but I'm just saying that there's probably, I work for the U.S. government, and there's all kinds of stipulations on anything we do about inclusion, diversity, EEO, all that stuff. So I'm just saying there may already be some forcing function that requires that to be in this. I'm not sure, but I suspect it is.
If it would still be timely, I'm happy to pull my motion and just move to table it for the next meeting. I just want to make sure that we still are in a good spot time-wise to send out something requesting support.
That was my next question. If this is time sensitive, do we have time for a rewrite to bring it back?
I honestly don't know the time limit, time frame on this. I know that they're pushing to get it through, to get it into, and just to be sure, these are resolutions, so they won't become bill. They won't, this is just to start the process with the federal government to say, hey, we have a problem and we need help all the way up to the federal government with solving this epidemic of roadway tragedies. So, because I didn't know, and Georgiana asked me, she's like, what's the difference between a resolution? This will never become a law or a bill. It will be in some other form. This is to draw it to the federal government's attention.
I think we can table it until December.
That, I'll go ahead and rescind or withdraw my initial motion and then move to table this until the next meeting.
Thank you. Ms. Gibson, did you want to add?
Yeah, who actually penned this resolution? Do you know?
The folks, whoever writes them for the House of Representatives and the Senate.
Exactly. So
Senator Blumenthal.
So here's, I guess, what we need to clarify what we're trying to do. Are we going to tell the federal government that they need to remove equity out of that? Or could we simply just write our letter stating that we support this in more of a generalistic term instead of, I really just don't see us getting the federal government to remove inequity out of a resolution that they've written. It seems to me sort of wasteful on our time and their time. We could simply just pen the letter stating what we're willing to support on it and the things in a general term, like what Commissioner Lober said, say, we want to cover this so that everybody gets served, not pull those terms out. I mean, that's to me, I think would be.
I think that's what we're talking about.
It's a resolution though. I mean, you can't.
Yeah,
Mr. Smith.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Smith. I'm sorry.
Whatever. I agree with you 100%. If you have inequities here because one area has accidents, another area doesn't, it doesn't have anything to do with the color of anybody's skin or where they were born. It has to do with the way the roads are constructed. End of story. So for us to try and politicize anything that we say, I think is denigrating to the people that are in these areas because they have bad roads, which is injuring their people, the kids, the adults. It doesn't have anything to do with the color of their skin or what their ethnicity is. So I agree with you 100%. And to your point, how many of these letters, how many of these groups like ours exist just in Florida that are going to respond to this? If every one of these groups has an objection to it, you better believe federal government's going to listen. If we just take the attitude, well, the feds are big and they're not going to listen to us, I don't agree with that. I think that we need to have our voices heard. And if that's what we believe, and I'm just telling you my point of view, you guys might have a totally different point of view than Commissioner Lober and the mayor and myself, but that's the way I feel. I just think that this is absurd and it's just creating divisiveness where it doesn't need to be.
Thank you, Commissioner Smith, Commissioner Lober, and then Mayor Medina.
Just a couple of things. First, I agree with Commissioner Smith as well. Ms. Gibson, you raise a good point. I was not suggesting, and I apologize if I was at all unclear with respect to it, that we draft something suggesting or demanding they remove particular terms. But my concern is that we don't draft things as listed here or as put in the agenda where we say we support the resolution because there are things in the resolution that frankly I'm not comfortable supporting. I would just instead make clear that we support the goal and then articulate the goal where we don't get into that stuff. And the other point I want to make with respect to what Commissioner Smith just said, everything he said is accurate. And then what's more than that or over and above that, even if we're the only group doing it, I think that our own congressman here and our own senator here would be a lot more inclined to value their own constituents' opinions. And if you have a representative entity that has folks from a number of different municipalities and from the county and from the port that serve on it, I would think there's some degree of value. So when Mr. Posey sees it or Congressman Posey sees it or whether our senator sees it, I cannot imagine that it's not going to have some level of impact. And I don't want to derail this by any means, but I think that it's important that if we really do have a concern about the way something's phrased, to at least ensure that we're not seen as supporting that. And the way that the suggested or draft resolution was written, it suggests that we support everything contained within this. I don't think we have the juice, quite frankly, to get them to pull out a particular term. So we just simply indicate what it is that we support and leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Lober. Mayor Medina and then Ms. Cost. Yes.
So, two things. I support the motion.
Speak to the mic.
As you were. The first thing is, I support the motion the way it was made today. The motion that he withdrew. The motion that was withdrawn. I wholeheartedly. That is correct. It was moved to table. However, I'm trying to bring that motion back because I think we have enough to react to not for the federal government. This is not an HR. This is us as a community supporting ultimately what the purpose is, removing the divisive comments. It has nothing to do with ethnicity. It has nothing to do with our age. It has everything to do with the bottom line is reducing fatalities in our community and enhancing those corridors where that criteria exists, where that fatality could exist. So that's why I'm supportive of reintroducing that motion. And I'd like to yield to Commissioner Lober to reinstate that motion or instead of tabling it, because I think we have an opportunity to fix something here that is purposefully wrong.
Someone else wanted to get here and hold on. Ms. Cost, yes.
Yeah, well, it grieves me to be the only one to speak up against the way the conversation is going. But first of all, I don't see where it refers to race, say low income. And the other comment I want to make is that, is equity really a partisan word now? Is equity a partisan word? This is about ending traffic accidents. There's a reality statistically that, as they say, I think they use the term low impact. No, they use the term low income, sorry. Neighborhoods are experiencing more. Statistically, without a doubt, that's true. I don't see where it says that this is about a certain race. It is about low income neighborhoods, which statistically do experience more of these tragedies. And just to say that the city of Cocoa has sent a letter of support. So
thank you.
There are cities within Florida that would see this as
Okay,
a good thing to move forward.
Thank you, Ms. Cost. Mr. Liber, we'll come back to you to wrap up, but hold on. Ms. Minus would like to make a comment.
I don't think I need a mic. If you can hear me. Okay, the mic is way down there, but okay. Thank you. But I'd like to just comment on this also. In the next to the last whereas on page 77, which is we're identifying here, it states, whereas a deep history of inequalities in the United States continues to impact transportation system with low-income neighborhoods experiencing more than twice as many pedestrian fatalities and so on and so forth. That is this, Ms. Smith, is this a draft template that is drawn up from the government?
Yes, those resolutions that you're reading there are the resolutions from those bodies. They're identical, but from the House and from the Senate.
Okay, so this is not what we drew up. This is what was, okay, correct. And we're just following that. So to me, if that is drawn up in this document, then the House, no, they have a reason for putting it here, in my opinion, and I really believe that. I believe that it should stay as presented, and we can move forward on that. This is not something that just we're putting together. This is a template, if you will, from the House that is sent down to us. I agree with Mr. Williams, I'm sorry, that we should table this to get more information on it and then bring it back, to be acted on. To try to push this through now, with the, modifications, then is not giving, due diligence here. So I would, ask to have this, table as Mr. Williams suggested.
And I'll second the motion to table in a normal rules of order. Once you have a motion to table to date certain, which would be our next meeting, and a second, the discussion ceases and we move on to the next, we take a vote and we move on to the next agenda item.
Yes, it is. So we have a motion from Mr. Williams. Is there a second to table this? And then there will be no more discussion.
His was my second, I think. Madam
Motion
Chair.
and second. Are we back to the original motion? Okay.
Because I moved the table and then
Yes, it
no
was.
action was taken on it, and then Mr. Williams seconded it.
All right. So it's motion, Mr. Lober, second. We did. We did. I think we're all talked out now. I think we're good. All right. Thank you. So that's what we'll do. This come back for December?
Yes,
We still
Madam
have to
Chair.
call it.
Yes. Hold. All right. All in favor of tabling?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries.
Madam Chair, just want to let the members know, Kim has prepared a PowerPoint presentation. So the information is in your package, and it's just providing an update on what the TPO has been up to over the past year concerning Vision Zero. And we've called out some of our Vision Zero cities, and we would love for you guys to take a look at this information. And we have a long ways to go. But you know, we have no greater responsibility to get rid of traffic fatalities and serious injuries. So we're going to continue on that. You asked us to do this, and I think we've made a lot of good progress. So the information is in your agenda package for your review.
Thank you very, very much. We're going to move on to presentations regarding Vision Zero, but we do have a public comment regarding Vision Zero as well, and that is Wayne Ackham. I don't see Sandra Sullivan's name on here. Sandra Sullivan. I don't see Sandra.
Sandra Sullivan, South Patrick Shores. Is this on? Can you hear me? Okay. So in the first sentence, I'm reading the 2020 State of the System report evaluates Brevard County's transportation network, monitoring safety, mobility, congestion, blah, blah, blah. I think there's one missing in there, and that is evacuation. Brevard has large areas of Barrier Island not reflected in the resolution. In the 2021 legislative session for the state, they approved the highest budget for resiliency planning, $640 million. The third item on that list involves the evacuation of vulnerable coastal communities. And then also $1 billion over the next 4 years. So when you look at a couple pages forward, page 98 under congested corridors, you see South Patrick Drive, State Road 523, or 513 rather, Banana River Drive, Bonita Causeway, that has a volume to capacity ratio of 0.89. When I look at the evacuation reports, from 1988, we were 18.5 hours to evacuate. In the more recent 2020 version, we are 18.5 hours to evacuate out the county. By state statute 163.3, anything more than 16 hours requires a change to development on those areas to keep density down. So back in 1999, there was a cap in our area where I live in South Patrick Shores and Satellite Beach, both by the county and the city, in response to funding that they received from the state. And so we have issues in our community as with regard to State Road 513. In the event of pre-landfall, there's a lot of rain. That is, it's like a hill, so that floods. And so all that volume of traffic is on A1A, which is an LOS of a D level. And so that would put problems on the north-south route. Bugali is not an alternative for evacuation because it is also a critical evacuation deficiency. Pineda has a bottleneck. So the numbers that you saw on that table of lives lost could be more than that table alone. If we have a fast-moving hurricane like Andrew or Ida, a Category 5 type, you could see very large numbers of loss of life. So I would like to request that you consider adding evacuation in the description of safety as a safety statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Presentation from Lorraine Bobo. Bobo. There you are.
Good afternoon. My name is Lorraine Bobo, and I'm with the Florida Department of Transportation District 5, which represents the 9 counties here in Central Florida. And I am our district safety administrator. And I'd like to share with you today about our new Office of Safety and our mission and where we're headed. Safety is beginning with me, and safety begins with you. And I'll explain a little bit more as I go forward. So we're a pretty new office. We were just created on June 1st, so it's a little over 4 months ago. Our secretary, Jared Perdue, knew that we needed to do something about safety on our roadways, on our collective roadways. So he created this Office of Safety. It reports directly to him. We are not development. We are not operations. We are looking at every opportunity that we possibly can to get to 0 fatalities and serious injuries on our roadways. Right now, we have a team of about 5 folks made up of folks that came from our traffic ops group and our modal office. And we're continuing to do the things that they were already doing, but then we're looking to see what more that we can do. So this is just showing you where we report directly to the secretary. I meet with him on a very regular basis to let him know what we're doing, make sure that we're carrying his vision forward. And we work with everybody. There's opportunities for us from the planning stages all the way to maintenance to lower those fatalities to 0. So what you see here are just some screenshots from the Governor's Highway Safety Report and the Dangerous by Design report. We're on the top of some lists that we don't want to be on the top of. And this is representing Florida. If you look over at the Dangerous by Design, those 3 that have the circles on them, those are here in Central Florida. One of those is here in Brevard County. So now if I take a look down onto the Florida level, in Central Florida, in our 9 counties, we lost 690 lives last year. That's 690 people that did not go home to their families. That's 690 families changed forever. Lots of different reasons why those lives were lost. None of them, though, deserve to not go home. Whether it was human behavior, by themselves, or by somebody else, they all deserve to go home. In Brevard County, 79 people lost their lives. A quarter of those were people that were walking and biking. Maybe they were enjoying the outdoors or they were trying to get to the transit stop. Whatever they were doing, they did not go home to their families. So we sat down, we talked about what do we want to achieve? We want to greatly reduce our crashes to ultimately get to 0 fatalities and serious injuries. Will we ever completely get crashes down to 0? Probably not. There's still going to be interactions between people that are walking and people that are biking and people that are driving cars and things like that. But we can get to 0 fatalities and serious injuries by slowing people down and things like that, changing behavior, changing that culture. So when we started the office, it was a little daunting, right? There was nobody that I could look to and say, oh, this is what we've done in the past. It was a brand new blank slate. And I was trying to figure out where do I even start with this? So I started envisioning these big rocks, right? We're doing a lot of really great things collectively. Our cities, our counties, the state, law enforcement, all of these groups are doing really great things such that our numbers aren't drastically increasing. They're just not drastically decreasing. So these are our big rocks. These are the current things that we're doing. But before we start to fill in those gaps, so you see those gaps between those big rocks to really make a positive impact on our roadways, we need to all be aligned. Okay, so we need to all be moving in the right direction, in the same direction. Not an us versus them, not, oh, that was a county road, not a state road, we don't need to worry about it. We do need to worry about everything. When you drove here today, you crossed state roads, city roads, county roads. Sometimes you may not have even realized which one you were on, right? The public doesn't know, and they shouldn't care. They should have a safe experience regardless of the way that they're traveling, regardless on whose roadway they're on. So now we want to find those maybe new things that we're not doing yet, or things that we're already doing and being more bold about it, filling in those gaps. So as we sat down, we were like, well, you need a goal, right? You need that long-term plan of how we're going to get there just to start formalizing what we're doing. So it came up with 3 main pillars: collaboration, education, and infrastructure. These all align very well with the safe system approach, with FDOT's strategic highway safety plan, and our vital few action plan. Right. Yep, I think I went too far. Okay. So the safe system approach. This is very similar to that video that you saw, that there's not just one solution to get us to 0 fatalities. It's going to take all of these different efforts working together to get to where we need to go. We've been working with Kim. I think it's on February 3rd. We're going to have a safe system summit, maybe. I don't remember what we called it, but it's a safe system to learn from each other and learn about the safe system approach so that we can continue to work together. So collaboration, what does this mean? This is internally with all of our departments, starting in planning and design and making sure that we're working together to implement everything that we possibly can to make our roadways safer. Our external partners, this is working with the cities and the counties and law enforcement and folks like yourselves and MPOs and TPOs to really figure out what we can do to make that difference and learn from each other. Community-centric. I envision, I live in Seminole County, and I think typically when I would look at a corridor, that's exactly what I would think, is it's the State Road 436 corridor, right? What are we going to do with this corridor? Well, that corridor goes through communities. It's through Altamont Springs and Castleberry and Longwood and all these places, right? We need to understand what is going on in that community and what that community wants. And so that is something that we've been focusing on quite a bit, and we will continue to do so. We need to share our FDOT safety story. And what I mean by this is when we talk about a project, it's not just a resurfacing project. It is a safety project that includes resurfacing, filling sidewalk gaps, slowing traffic down, things like that. We need to explain to the public what this project is doing. Sharing our efforts and learning from others. There's probably things that you're doing in each of your cities and in the county that maybe another city could benefit from and go, oh, we hadn't even thought about that, right? So how do we create those opportunities for us to share those experiences? I talked earlier about aligning our various efforts. We need to all be going in the same direction if we really want to make a positive impact. Education. So we do a lot of education today. Personally, I don't think it's enough. I think we need to be getting out into the schools more. My boys will not let me move the car without their seatbelt on. And I'm sure I was probably partially to blame for that, right? Make sure your seatbelt's on, that type of thing. But I cannot leave that driveway. So they're gonna carry that with them, right? They're gonna, when they start to drive in a few years, they're gonna make sure that they're wearing their seatbelt and hopefully that their friends are as well. That's how we build that culture. But safety starts with me. When you made your way here today, whether you were driving or walking or biking, you made choices along that entire path, right? You stopped at the stoplight. You stopped at the signal, or stopped at the crosswalk while somebody was needed to cross. You made decisions that saved lives. Hopefully you didn't pick up your phone. That ding went off. It's very tempting. Let me just see who it was. That second that you take your eyes off the road, something could happen in front of you. And now something horrible could happen. So just continue to make those safe choices. And that's where I talk about it starts with us. You don't have to be in this industry to make our roadways safer. So how do we share that with our public? How do we get them to appreciate that they can make a difference to improve the safety on our roadways? Talked about reaching our children. I could go on and on about that with my boys. There's a lot of different ways that we can engage. And I'll give the example of my husband only listens to Sirius XM. So if we pay for an ad on a local radio station, he'll never hear it. I might hear it, I go back and forth, but he never will. So how do we reach folks like him? There's got to be different ways that we can engage. In infrastructure, I think this is typically where FDOT and those of us working on projects and things like that, this is where we can make an impact and help to influence that behavior. So when we talk about implementing countermeasures to slow you down so that you're almost like forced to kind of pay attention and not pick up your phone, put your phone down and things like that. There's a lot of opportunity, not just on our projects with high crash corridors. We want to look at every single project and make sure that we are doing as much as we possibly can to make an impact. So every single resurfacing project that comes out of our shop will get looked at. Do we want to lower that speed? Do we want to look at the target speed and lower it? Doesn't matter whether there's high crashes or not. It looks similar to another project. Hey, this worked over here. Let's use this here. We need to be bold and proactive, not just reactive. So that's where I'm talking about where we need to look at every single project. There is something that we could do to make that roadway safer. So we created this email address, D5-Safety Ideas, and it is encouraging our folks internally, externally, anybody here, if you have an idea, whether it's something you might see at an intersection, or have we ever thought about educating in this way, or whatever it may be, share it with us. We look at every single one of them, and if we can implement it, we will. And even if it's not something we can do, there might be some opportunity or some other idea that comes out of that we can implement. So we like to end our presentations with a safety message. So this is my safety second, because it takes just a second to be safe. It is Pedestrian Safety Month, the month of October. So whether you are a person that is walking, I ask that you be a responsible walker, or if you're driving, please be respectful of the person that is walking. And again, safety begins with me, but it begins with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. That was very good. Are there any questions? Yes, please.
Kind of a question, comment combo. So a couple, well, maybe it's not been a couple years, maybe a year and a half ago, I had a constituent of mine reach out to me about an intersection, actually not terribly far from here, that was off of, well, the main road was US 1, and there was a side road that connected to it. And the concern was that more and more people were beginning to use that road. There had previously been another road less than a block away that cut through. That road was shut for whatever reason. I don't know why it was. And the concern was with more people moving there and with less access to it and more use of the roadway, that a turn lane would be something that's potentially appropriate. And at the time when I checked, and this is probably every bit of 18 months ago, the general crux of what I got back from FDOT was, well, we don't have any data showing that there have been any sort of fatalities or major injuries there. I know I talked to Georgiana about this a while back, so she's nodding over there. But the crux was essentially, we don't have any historic data showing that there have been serious injuries or fatalities. So it's likely not something that we could push forward. And my thought was, at the time, and still, I understand there's a need to put money where the fatalities are. I absolutely get that. But just as there's a need to do that, and just as there's a need to spend money potentially on expansion in certain cases, it's not that it's an either or proposition. I think maybe there's a little bit, what the amount may be could be something that's subjective, but it troubles me that when you have a situation that you can foresee without needing a crystal ball is going in a direction that's less safe, to basically have an agency that, at least at the time, had the outlook, well, we haven't had anyone maimed yet, so therefore get back to me after it gets worse and then we'll put some money into it. I just didn't know if there were any thoughts that you might have on that in terms of if that's still more or less the agency's de facto position, or if there's a little more wiggle room with that now. And I don't ever want to say that we should neglect an area where there's a tremendous incidence of traffic accidents in favor of an area where it may or may not happen in the future. But it just troubles me when you could articulate what the concerns are, that it's something where we just have to wait for the inevitable to happen.
Yep. Thank you. I appreciate the comments. So I've got a couple thoughts in my head on that. So, one is, I'm not getting a whole bunch of extra millions and millions and millions of dollars, right, to do every single time there is something that is brought up. So we still have constraints. The thought process that I've asked the team to go through is to at least talk about it, to at least consider, what do we need to do? A lot of times when something like that comes up, it's probably in one of our databases. So when a project does come up, resurfacing, for example, we can say, hey, 3 years ago, this came up, maybe we can include that into this project or something like that, right? I'd have to look at this specific idea, but the main premise is, I do believe that we're thinking more boldly and more openly than we were maybe even 18 months ago, right? We do have our standards and things like that we need to follow, but I feel like those are more guidelines than maybe they used to be. So I'm not going to say like, oh, let's go put in turn lanes everywhere, right? We still need to evaluate everything, but I feel like we're being more open than we maybe used to be.
Appreciate it. I'm going to get with you about that later.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, Georgiana.
So Lorena, I just wanted to mention, first of all, I think you are going to do an amazing job leading this particular office. And I think it's critically important. We've had 3 projects that have come before the governing board. All 3 of them, the recommendations were roundabouts. And we all know that what we struggle with is our citizens, a lot of our citizens, they don't like changes in traffic patterns. That gets people concerned, upset. And of course, the traffic circle at Wickham and St. Andrews, that's what everyone really thinks about. Right. And so, I know that the department has to look at that configuration every time they touch an intersection. And I know that there's going to come a time where we're going to get a modern roundabout in Brevard, but it's going to be painful. It already is as we work through this process. So I think that education to the public is key. Our elected officials, they're on the front lines in dealing with this as well. Understanding really the data to help people understand, okay, it's going to have just as much capacity and much more than a traditional four-way stop. I think if we had that information, that would be very helpful as we move forward. And I would encourage the department that we really need that. You know, we don't have another roundabout, or excuse me, modern roundabout to compare it to here in Brevard. I will say that we did, just now that we're talking about roundabouts, compare crash data to the traffic circle in Vieira. And would you guess how many people have died or been seriously injured at that traffic circle in Vieira? 0. And so I know that a lot of our citizenry, they talk about the circle of death, but that's not based in fact. And then we have also looked at crash data within the vicinity in Vieira. I think we looked at Wickham and Morrell and Judge Fran Jameson and Stadium. And within a 5-year period, there were 3 and 4 severe injuries. So when you look at that, even talking about a traffic circle, there's really no comparison there whatsoever. But the point is we've got some challenges. And not every location is a good fit, even though the data, the engineering may back it up. And we do depend on the department, the professional engineers, to tell us what is a good fit. But we're going to need some help as we move forward. If we are really, we can't continue to say no to these proven countermeasures if we're going to get to 0. We deserve better. But we're going to have some help to get there, more so than what we've gotten so far.
Great, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Forrester.
Take the whole TPO board, mayors of all the cities, we all go to England for 3 weeks, rent some cars and drive around traffic.
And remember, you're driving on the left side of the road too.
Yeah, and there's that. Yeah.
That's not helpful.
If I could make a comment on that, education. I have learned that what I was thinking is a roundabout, because I use the term roundabout generically. It's a circle, you go there and you go around it. And there is a distinct difference between a roundabout and a traffic circle. But when our residents hear roundabout, they see a traffic circle. And they see that when you're on the outer lane and someone's making a turn, you're going to T-bone them because they're going to cut you right off. And I think that's what's causing this great fear, because that's what we all think of as a roundabout. That's what I thought. I just recently learned that is not a roundabout. It is a traffic circle, and they are configured differently. Roundabouts are larger, which is what everyone has said. This is too small, but it's a traffic circle. Roundabouts are generally larger, and I know that that's an issue for having enough land to make it larger. But the entrances and the exits off of them are not like the what we call the circle of death, which, as Georgiana just pointed out, no one has died. So, maybe we could make that clear to our residents what those distinct differences are. And once we get one, a real one, and they see that it does work well, I think it'll be a lot easier for the other ones. But they really have to be everything that we're selling, all that in a bag of chips too. It has to be that.
Yes, how they're designed is very important. And that's what we've been focusing on. And as Georgiana said, they're not for every intersection. There's a lot of analysis that goes into it before we even suggest it as a solution. I'll give Volusia County as an example. We had a horrible crash a few years back. I think it was a grandmother and her 3 grandchildren were T-boned at a stop control. And it was horrible. And the community was like, you need to do something immediately at this location. And so we recommended a roundabout. It was a really good location for a roundabout. And there was a lot of opposition. We said, listen, this is the solution here. And we put it in. Haven't heard a word. It works wonderfully. People are flowing through. We now have another one going in not far from there at a similar location. We put 2 in Flagler. They really do work if you have picked the right location. So, and that's what we're trying to save lives, that really is at the heart of what we're trying to do. So.
And one more thing, Madam Chair, also another concern is capacity.
Yes.
And if there's data that, we could show that the level of service and the capacity is going to be tremendously improved, I think that might make a difference, but just saying it.
Sure, we've got that.
And I know you do, but trying to package it in a way where we could share that, I think would be very helpful.
Okay.
These are, we're all getting hit up with these questions, and I think that will help us in the future.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Smith.
Thank you. I'm just going to interject here. I come from New Jersey, and roundabout circles, they're everywhere. And they are safer. They move a lot more traffic. People don't die on them. And a classic example, and if you guys could get some kind of a video. Ocean City, New Jersey is a shore resort, summertime. It swells to over 100,000 people. So from mid-May to mid-September, there's an influx of roughly 100,000 people that come into that town on a Friday afternoon, and they all leave Sunday night. And the traffic is constant. But there's a huge circle that it fills up. And to my knowledge, I never paid any attention, but I don't know anybody ever died on that circle. But in the wintertime, there's only about 6,000 people that live in that city. So you can imagine the influx of all these people. And it's largely weekends because people come down to the shore for the weekend and they go home to go back to work on Monday morning. And it is just a constant flow. And the Causeway isn't a whole lot different than the causeways that we have between Melbourne and Mel Beach or O'Galley and Satellite Beach. So if you can imagine 100,000 people going on one of those roads, going into Satellite Beach on a Friday night, and then leaving Sunday night, you have an idea of what kind of traffic we're talking about. And it just moves. And people don't bump into each other. People don't stop and scream and yell at each other. But it's all in how it's constructed.
Yep.
And it's a shame that the people in this area, the only roundabout that they can conjure up any kind of vision on is the one that Vieira designed. And it, excuse my French, sucks. It's a shame. So you got a lot to overcome.
Thank you.
Mr. Wilbur?
Couple thoughts, real briefly on what Commissioner Smith just mentioned. Now you have me even more worried about the roundabouts or the traffic circles, because if we have to take Snooki and the Jersey Shore crowd along with the traffic circles, I don't know that I want those traffic circles anywhere. I don't know that that's something I'm willing to take. Although they're welcome to come here and spend their tax dollars. I'm happy to not have a state income tax, thanks to folks that do come down and spend their money. I think one of the other items that was touched on earlier in public comment that might also be useful, at least for certain locations where you have a proposal, whether it's a roundabout or whether it's something totally different. If we have an idea in terms of what the evacuation time is now and what the evacuation time would be, at least best estimate, post-project, that would be interesting, because if you're shaving time off the evac, there's a potential value. But if you're adding time to an evac, there may be a concern in the other direction that, yes, you're slowing people down because they have to slow down, but are you keeping them there to their peril or to their detriment if we have a named hurricane coming on shore? So I don't, that's one thing, frankly, I don't know in terms of the proposal with the A1A stretch in Cape Canaveral. I don't know if that's something that increases, decreases, or keeps it consistent, but it's something that ought to at least be a factor there. I know that some of my constituents would find that interesting.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'll take that back. Just fundamentally thinking about it, typically in an evacuation, everyone's moving in the same direction, right? So you're just moving through. You're not stopping at the signal. You're just moving through. Benefit of a roundabout as well is if a storm does come through, if we lose power, we're putting a generator at every single location where there's a signal. There's no poles. It functions. The biggest thing is moving trees that maybe fell out of the way, which we'd have been doing with the signal anyways. So it's, we're actually looking at one that it's a signal that's just kind of out in the middle of nowhere, another part of our district. And we were talking about it yesterday and we were like, it's actually fundamentally just a good location for a roundabout. And if that signal stops working, we have to send somebody out. It's almost like 2 hours from our office to like just get there. You don't have to worry about that anymore. So side note, but.
And I think just last thought on it, I think there are some locations that are potentially workable. Before I moved to where I am now, I was in Viera East, east of Ralph Williams Elementary School on Clubhouse. There's a little roundabout there, and frankly, it's fine, but anything or nothing would be fine because the traffic volume's so low. So I think there are some areas where it's largely a non-issue. But the question is, again, the fit. And I think Georgiana hit on it. Just because the engineering may suggest that it's a fit, there is a degree of ground truthing that's required to make sure that it really will work anywhere, because every little location that you're looking at has its own peculiarities. And I think some are much more poorly suited to roundabouts or traffic circles, whatever you choose to look at, than others.
Right. No, your point is taken, and that's exactly why we have open houses and things like that, is to, not just show up and start building it. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. All right, we'll move on to item B, which is the 2020 State of the System Report. Andrew Garrison with Kittleson.
Hello, everyone. Like she said, I'm Andrew Garrison, and I'm here to present the results of the 2020 State of the System Report. So first off, I'd just like to discuss what we'll be talking about. So I'll give you a brief reminder of what these SOS is and why we conduct it. We'll talk about countywide trends, safety, congestion, and some countywide metrics. I'm sure the big question everyone has is, what did COVID do in 2020? So we'll get into that had effects in each of those categories. So let's discuss that. So first, what is the SOS? Well, it's an annual evaluation of Brevard County's transportation network. We look at roadways, transit, performance over various ports. We look at demographics, tourism, commerce, and a lot of other categories as well. Oh, I didn't switch the slide. I'm sorry about that. There you go. So why do we conduct the SOS? Well, it provides technical guidance to the TPO regarding the performance of the transportation system. This can help identify where federal and state dollars should best be spent to enhance the transportation network. So we've got some countywide trends. So the first thing before we get into some of these metrics that were affected by COVID that I wanted to point out, Brevard County continued to grow in 2020. We had about 12,000 people. So even despite COVID, is there a question? Sorry. No. Okay. Even despite COVID, more people were moving to Brevard County. So then some of these metrics that were affected by COVID, we saw traffic volumes decrease by about 9%. Freight volumes went down by about 3%. Transit ridership went down by about 20%, which makes sense because a lot of public facilities weren't as easily usable during COVID. And then finally, hotel occupancy went down by a little bit less than 20%. Again, that makes sense because the tourism industry was so affected by COVID. Then we have some statistics for our various ports. So as you can see, the Melbourne Airport had about a 50% decrease in passengers in 2020. Similarly, for Port Canaveral, cruise passengers went down by about 50%. Port cargo did a little bit better, but still 25% decrease is pretty significant. One piece of good news is that we did see more space missions in 2020. I think the one that everyone probably remembers is SpaceX first manned spaceflight, but there were a variety of other significant missions last year. So then safety. So during the SOS analysis looks at a lot of different crash metrics on our SOS roadway network. So on that SOS network, we had about a 13% decrease in crashes from 2019 to 2020. So regardless of all the other impacts of COVID, a big drop in crashes like that is good news. Over on the right side, you can see our top 25 corridors for crash frequency over that 5-year period we looked at. You can see that US 192 is the #1 corridor, followed by State Road 3 and Babcock Street. We also looked at crash severity. So unfortunately, we did see an increase in serious injury and fatal crashes in 2020 on our roadway network, so about a 3% increase. Over on the right side, you can see our top 25 corridors for crash severity. And notably, US 1 is on that list in a lot of places, and it's all of our top 3 corridors are on US 1. So then we also looked at vulnerable road users in 2020 or for crash statistics. And back to some good news, we had about a 15% decrease in crashes involving these vulnerable road users. That includes pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorcyclists. Over on the right side, you can see our top 5 corridors for crash frequency in each of these categories: pedestrians, bikes, and motorcycles. For pedestrians, the #1 corridor was on Palm Bay Road. For motorcycles and bikes, it was both on US 1 in the Melbourne area. And then we also provide a table that kind of highlights those corridors again, just so you can see them all laid out. You see that US 1 shows up multiple times, so does State Road A1A, US 192 and Babcock Street also are on that list. The other thing we wanted to do is provide that same map again, but just identifying locations where there are already projects planned in the tip that may help address some of these safety concerns. So there's lighting projects, intersection improvements, sidewalks, and so on. So even though these are all kind of shown up in our top 5, hopefully some of these projects will help reduce the number of crashes happening there. And then moving on, we have our congestion statistics. So the first thing I wanted to just point out was our highest volumes for 2020. So for roadways, a lot of roadways that make that you would expect to see there: Palm Bay Road, Malabar Road, Wickham Road, all show up at the top. Similarly for intersections, not a lot of surprises there. Babcock Street at Palm Bay Road tops the list. And then you can see where those intersections and roadways are on the map. And then we have our congested corridors. So obviously we want to know which roadways are pushing the capacity. And so that's what we're doing here, is just documenting where those congested corridors are. The one thing that I would note is that compared to last year, there are a lot less roadways on this list because traffic volumes went down on a lot of our roadways that drew them out of the congested corridor area or the list. So finally, we have our countywide metrics. So these are just a variety of other metrics that we look at in Brevard County. So the percent of roadway miles with congestion, as we already discussed, congestion went down in 2020. Similarly, transit ridership, as we already discussed, went down. We also look at the percentage of roadways with existing ped and bike facilities, and that stayed about the same in 2020. And then we also have a couple more crash statistics. I just want to note that these are for all roads in Brevard County, not just the SOS network. But with that being said, annual ped bike crashes went down, so did annual vehicle crashes, as well as annual fatal ped bike crashes. Unfortunately, we did see an increase in annual fatal crashes in Brevard County in 2020. So that is the 2020 state of the system, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Garrison?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Andrew, I wanted to, evacuation, that is a measure that we are looking at in the SOS.
Yes, so we do have a brief section in our traffic section that talks about evacuation routes and ITS. I think we track evacuation routes where there is CCTV footage so you can monitor the evacuation route, but we could potentially look at other metrics in the future if we wanted to.
And for the purposes of prioritizing our projects and ranking and what have you, those measures are considered as well, correct? Okay, wanted to be sure.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Forrester.
Yes.
But I recall, I'm trying to find the slide here. It's gone down 4 straight years.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of factors involved with that. Terry, do you want to speak to that?
Not trying to pick on you.
Oh, that's all right. It's every once in a while.
Mr. Forrest, I'll let you finish your question. I'll be glad to try to answer it.
The battery share went down from 2016 2,700,000 between 2019 and 2,200,000. That's a 500,000 people, almost 20%. And that was before COVID.
That's correct.
And which I understand that it COVID. But what I'm seeing is a downtrend prior to that.
Yes, sir.
Coming back. Both from COVID and supply shortages and everything else. Are we doing anything? What are we looking at to try to help that along? Because that's one way to address a lot of different issues: road capacity, accident, pedestrian, bicycle. A lot of things can be tied into that transit.
Yes, sir. And so first, I'll respond to the first part of your question about transit ridership being down. Nationally, transit ridership has been decreasing over the last several years, and we can attribute it to more fuel-efficient vehicles that are more cost-effective for individuals, ride-sharing programs that have popped up, individuals being able to now utilize alternate modes of transportation versus the transit systems. So we have seen this as a trend in the industry overall. So you are exactly correct that ridership had decreased prior to COVID-19. And as Andrew's statistics show, that it's a 20% decrease over the prior year. And that would have been like the beginning of our comeback almost, was 2018 was when we started seeing ridership almost start to return in transit in Brevard County overall. So COVID did do a lot of detriment to those numbers. We're now seeing a slight return to pre-COVID, 2019 numbers are about 7%. This annual figure by comparison to the previous figure. The second part of the question is, what are we doing? Right now, I'm actually with a consortium of other systems throughout the state of Florida. We're embarking on the opportunity for a marketing campaign to almost say, let's bring riders back. But the biggest component is, and as Georgiana said early in the meeting, we are doing a survey, which is online right now. I'm sure you guys have seen the cards like this. Teletransit. One of the concerns and the questions that we have to answer is, why don't you ride a transit vehicle? Well, there are several different reasons why people don't, and we want to learn those answers. So when we are looking to encourage individuals to ride transit, how do we best utilize our funds and how do we best target the individuals? School kids, of course, they and others see transit as a service that they would never get, they would never utilize. So we want to change that mindset as well. So the answer to your question is, what we're going to be doing is looking at what factors play a role in individuals not using transit, and then how we could best spend the funds to encourage. One thing that I know offhand is frequency of service. If you have a vehicle that comes once every 30 minutes versus something that comes every 5 minutes, you're more apt to take it because you're not worried about when it passes by, when you have to get the next one. Does it go where you need it to go is another factor. So these are all factors that we know play a major role in individuals using our service, and that's what we want to really focus on. Of course, I have, make sure I'm counting right, 2 commissioners in the room with us right now. And of course, I go to them every year and say, hey, listen, we need more service. And and they understand there's a need, but the question is the funding available to provide for that need? And when we do go for that question is that we're providing the best and most efficient service to be utilized by our patrons. So I know that was a long answer, but I think the best thing that we can do is look at where it can be best utilized and then look to implement afterwards. You're welcome. Oh, and another part, Mr. Forrester, you mentioned, and that's one thing because right before we saw, when, like I mentioned, fuel efficient vehicles and gasoline prices were down, people were driving, of course, and when it started going back, you see it, not necessarily here in Brevard County because it's not that big of a factor, but one of the last things you said is, and I mentioned this at our TAC and CAC meeting, is that a transit vehicle reduces congestion significantly if you have 40 people on board one vehicle versus 40 cars on a roadway. You know, less people to have accidents, less people to have congestion. There's a lot of factors that could benefit, but first you got to get them on the bus.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
May I ask a question?
Yes, Mr. Gugelman, thank you.
Actually, two questions. What is the bus cost right now for somebody to ride?
Well, it all depends on the individual. The fares for a passenger is $1.50 for a passenger, for an able-bodied regular passenger, and 75 cents or a reduced fare for an elderly or disabled individual to ride the bus.
Right. And what percentage of the operation does the fare box cover?
Oh, a very, very, very small percent. I do apologize. I can't give you the exact number, but it's less than 10% easily.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you. Mr. Lober, did you want to make a comment? No?
Amazingly, no.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, there's a first.
Any other comments or questions? Anything else for Andrew while he's here before we move on to the next item? All right, thank you very much for your presentation. Very good, thank you. All right, we'll move on to the next item, which is the NASA Causeway Bridge and Space Commerce Way update. Ralph Beauvais with Volkert.
Anna Taylor, FDOT Planning, filling in for the project team today. Ralph Beauvais is going to be here to give an update on the exciting NASA Causeway Bridge and the Parkway.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Oh. Okay. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, honorable members of the board, Director Gillette. For the record, my name is Ralph Beauvais. I'm a vice president with the consulting engineering firm of Volkert Incorporated, and I'm here today on behalf of both Space Florida and the Florida Department of Transportation. The purpose of my presentation is to provide an update on the design and permitting project for the widening of Space Commerce Way. This project is being led by Space Florida in partnership with FDOT and NASA. I also have a brief update on the recently completed NASA Causeway Bridge, PD&E, and final design project. That project was led by FDOT in partnership with NASA and Space Florida. And as you know, both of these projects are linked by NASA Parkway. And together, all three facilities provide primary access to and from Kennedy Space Center, including the KSC Visitor Center, Exploration Park, and Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. In 2019, Space Florida took the lead in preparing a federal grant application for the construction funding through the US DOT's Infrastructure for Rebuilding America, or INFRA grant program, for all three projects. The INFRA grant was awarded to Space Florida and represents the US DOT federal share of the construction cost for NASA Causeway Bridge, the resurfacing of NASA Parkway, and the reconstruction of Space Commerce Way. Additional funding for these projects for construction is obligated from other federal and non-federal sources. Located on NASA property, the design and permitting for Space Commerce Way is being led by Space Florida, as I mentioned. FDOT is providing project management and design review oversight and will also advertise and lead the construction. The project limits are from Kennedy Parkway to NASA Parkway, a distance of approximately 2.7 miles. In addition to providing direct access to Exploration Park and Kennedy Space Center Visitor Center, Space Commerce Way provides a link between North Merritt Island and Titusville and is designated as an emergency evacuation route. The proposed improvements consist of adding 2 lanes to the existing 2-lane facility. This 4-lane improvement was previously designed, permitted, and environmental impacts were mitigated in the early 2000s, but the widening was never constructed. The current design effort will accommodate the new primary entrance to KSC Visitor Center and will address changes in stormwater management rules affecting permitting. In addition, the project involves updating compliance with the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, in accordance with current FDOT procedures for federally funded projects. Today's presentation is actually part of our community awareness program for the Space Commerce Way project and agency coordination efforts that continue throughout the design and permitting phase. The Space Commerce Way design and permitting project will be completed within a total of 18 months. We actually started back in February of this year and recently submitted the 60% plans or phase submittal, along with the draft permit applications. We anticipate completing the required NEPA compliance in the spring of next year with permits issued in early summer. The project will be ready for construction advertisement in July 2022 in order to comply with the specific terms of the agreement in the infra grant. Now I'll put my FDOT hat on. On behalf of FDOT, I'll give you an update on the NASA Causeway Bridge. Many of you may remember some of my presentations over the last couple of years as I led the PD&E study beginning in 2019. The study started back in February of 2018, actually, and was completed in April of 2020. To accelerate the production schedule of the bridge, final design services were overlapped with the PD&E study. The final plans and permits were completed in May of this year, which allowed DOT to advertise for construction bids. The overall duration for the study, design, and permitting was just over 3 years. And we had many changes along the way and a lot of agency coordination to contend with through that process. Just about 6 weeks ago, on August 25th, the construction contract was awarded to Orion Marine. Construction to replace the existing bridge is expected to begin later this year and will be completed by 2025. The existing bridge will be replaced with a new high-level fixed span bridge and will be built in phases. The new eastbound structure will be offset to the south of the existing bridge and will be built first. This will allow 2 lanes of traffic to remain open in each direction during construction, which was a requirement from NASA in terms of their space freight transport operations. Once the new eastbound bridge is completed, traffic will be routed to the new structure to allow the demolition of the existing bridges and the construction of the new westbound structure. As documented in the PD&E study, the existing bridge is eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. Therefore, in accordance with Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966 as amended, a mitigation plan has been developed to offset this adverse effect of replacing the historic bridge. This mitigation plan includes the recordation of the history associated with the bridge, namely the development of Kennedy Space Center and the birth of the national space industry. A historic marker is currently being fabricated and will be erected near the new bridge within 1 year after construction is completed. The history of the bridge is also going to be preserved and published on KSC's website. On behalf of Space Florida and NASA and FDOT, Madam Chair, I appreciate the opportunity to update you and your board on these 2 very important regional projects. I would also, on behalf of Space Florida, like to commend your board and staff's participation in their assistance in the infra grant application. A lot of work went into it. There were a lot of moving parts. Georgiana and Stephen in particular were very instrumental in helping Space Florida, DOT, and others in putting that information together on a very short time frame. And so, again, on behalf of Space Florida, we'd like to commend the TPO's efforts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are you taking questions? Are there any questions from Mr. Beauvais while we have him up here? No? All right. Thank you very much for a great presentation.
Thank you all very
Thank
much.
you so much.
Well, actually, I do have a real brief one. So the 18-month timetable that you talked about ended with July 2022 to have, I guess, the bids for construction go out. Do we have any idea in terms of what a build time would be for that? Are we talking a couple of years, or what are we looking at?
Right now, I think the construction is going to start at the end of this year with a completion date sometime in 2025. There are incentives, though, built into the construction contract for accelerating that.
Excellent.
A lot of that is going to depend on flight schedules or launch schedules, which continue to increase over years. So there are also provisions where no work can be done during, launch events, but there are incentives to accelerate.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Any questions or comments or anything from the board here before we, the next meeting, there will be no meeting in November. The next meeting is December 9th. We'll be holding the annual election of officers in December. Oh, yes, Mr. Williams. There is. We talked about that earlier, correct, Beata? Yes, yes. All right, thank you. Can we get a motion to adjourn? Yes. Motion by Mr. Jordan, second by Ms. Minus. Thank you. See you all in December. Thank you.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.